Welcome to the Moving Miracles channel. Here we talk about the wonderful works of God in the lives of people. On this episode, I'm going to be interviewing a very wonderful friend of mine, Titi. All right. Yeah, so let me just tell you about how I know Titi. I know that in the year 2022 or thereabout, I was praying to God about new relationships. I wanted to have new friends. And I know that God graciously gifted me just within the space of a year. God just opened doors, and I had some beautiful friendships and relationships that came into my life. And so the first miracle on the Moving Miracles channel was meeting Titi. And then we got to interact, and Titi of ethnicology, as I like to call her, is one very blessed, very blunt woman. And we just got interacting one day, and she told me a story of her life, and I believe it will be a blessing to you on this channel. It's a story of how Titi lost something very dear to her, and I was like, what? About her recovery, her loss and her recovery. So this is a story of loss, and this is a story of recovery. So just tell us that story from your heart, just flow, Titi, like we did that day. I hope you can flow like that.
I hope so too. But where I was staying, I think they wanted to pull it down. So they had given us notice that they were, they wanted to pull the building down, and, giving us time to move. We were given the 6 months notice, and it was during COVID, So initially I was like, oh my gosh, this is during COVID. Who does that? But I kind of like the fact that it was during COVID that we got the notification. But I went praying because, during the time of COVID, there was nothing to do. There was work, but then after work, you have to entertain your brain. So I just chose that time to build my relationship with God, more or less. And one of the things I was praying for was a home. Somewhere I could find, I could call my home, have peace, and use it both for myself and also for my, part of my business as well. And, usually people say they pray for specifics, but for me, I prayed and said, I wanted God to gift me, with a home. And I wasn't saying, it wasn't a question of whether it was free of charge, because that's another thing that people would say, whether it's free of charge or not, but it wasn't about that. But I was looking for a place that would give me peace within myself. And so straight after the curfew was lifted, I went house hunting, and then I found one. Or so I thought. I found one. And at that point in time, I thought that was it. I thought that was my answered prayer. Obviously we discussed about the pricing, and funnily enough, they were like willing. We met ourselves, midway. It was a good transaction. The agent had given the offer letter. The owner, I had spoken to the so-called owner at that point in time. And I went there twice, the first time to see it, the second time to really confirm that it was really what I wanted. Prayed about it, came back home and started putting my resources together, and made the payments. I was very happy. I thought, okay, finally I found the perfect place. And I was looking forward to moving in. In my head, I had started all the decor, everything, and then they told me that they just wanted everything to be finalized. That was what I was waiting for. So a few days went by, nothing. So I called their lawyer and said, look, listen, what's going on? I would like to get things going while you guys are trying to finalize stuff. So I had told them that I wanted to measure the windows, for the, to have the curtains installed. So, but hopefully, I was thinking that by the time the windows are sorted out, when I move in, the curtains will be there, and I'll be good to go. The agent wasn't available, the lawyer wasn't available, and then at that point in time, I thought I had the phone number of the owner, but the owner was not reachable. So I sent a text message. There was no response. Then later on, the agent said, "Oh, you can just go there. It's fine." That was like 2 or 3 days after trying to get in touch with them. So I jumped in a car with the guy that was going to help me with the curtains and stuff, and the security said, "You can't come in." And I was like, "What do you mean I can't come in? I've just paid for the place." "No, you can't come in." And then I saw a banner, a different banner, completely. So I called the number on the banner and I said, "I'm going to house number, because it was a townhouse." And then the guy goes, "No, I'm the agent, and I don't know anything about you." And I said, "No, I came with this person, we'll finalize everything." Then he said to me, says, "Oh, by the way, how much did you pay for it?" And I thought, that's strange, so I thought, you know what, it's okay. Let me call. Maybe the owner had given it to different sets of people. So obviously she didn't inform the other side that, that was the case. So basically I tried calling the lawyer again, and then there was absolutely no response. So I called the agent and I said, "Listen, we need to do a 3-way call, because this is, the security says I have to call somebody. I've called the person doesn't know anything about, the sales." So he said, "Okay, hold on." And he did a 3-way call, and then he said, "Oh, you know what, why don't I call you back?" I said, "Sure." And all this while I was outside the building. And he didn't call back. But later on I called him and he said, "Oh, he got the lawyer." And he says, the guy said, "Oh, that there shouldn't be a problem." So I said, "Okay, if there shouldn't be a problem, this is the number that they've asked me to call. Can you please call this person so we can sort it out?" And then I tried calling the so-called, owner, not to be reached, absolutely nothing. So instead of standing outside, I decided that let me go home. I can, it's easy. It's something that you can easily sort out. So I tried the owner again, because by this time we were having conversations. So her not being there was a bit weird. So finally she calls me back and she said, "Oh, sorry, she was in Abuja, and how it is in Abuja, it's very busy and all that stuff." And I explained to her what had happened. And she said, "Oh, that she just wants to sort out 1 or 2 things." And I thought that was weird. I said, "Sort out 1 or 2 things. Why don't you let me do that sorting out, and then let's just finalize everything." So at that point in time, I said to her, "You know what? I need us to finalize the papers, so that I know that, okay, this is mine. I'm settling in and all that stuff." So she went off again, and so I called the agent and I said, "You know what? I'm not feeling too comfortable about this. Why is it taking so long?" And then at that point, I said to him, "Maybe I should get my money back, and then whenever they're ready to, to sell, they should let me know." The agent went AWOL. I didn't know what the agent was. The so-called lawyer, I was calling and calling, nothing. So we traced the address. I got somebody to trace the address. When they got there, nothing. So it was like, no, this is not, it can't be happening. This is not real. It shouldn't be happening, So I thought, okay, I think it was my neighbor at that point. My neighbor said, "Look, let's get someone and let's go and trace them, or let's trick them, to meet us at some point." So I sent a message to the agent, because now the owner's phone wasn't going through at all. And all the transaction was a transfer. It went to a first bank. So one of my friends said, "Listen, it went into a bank, it's a transaction. Let's see if the bank can do something." So they asked me to write to First Bank. I never got a response from First Bank. I reported to the police. I got my lawyer to, write to the police. We wrote a petition and things. And then they said, oh, there's a syndicate. So we're like, okay, there's a syndicate. If there's a syndicate, surely we should be able to. This only happened, I had taken pictures. They told me to write a letter. I wrote a letter. The bank statement was there. Everything was there. But we weren't going anywhere. So, but I had faith at that point. I don't know whether you'd say it's a stupid thing, but I had faith in the Nigerian police that the Nigerian police would do good. But then it got to the point that, oh, we need money to do this. And we need money to do this. But that time, I was still, in my heart, I was hoping that somehow, the money will be returned. Because we're talking about, maybe a week now. But when I realized that the money was not going to be returned, I was scammed, completely scammed. I had gone back there just to be sure, because I thought this cannot be happening to me. I checked everything, so why should this be happening to me? And then there was an Indian guy, and they'd done exactly the same thing.
Not on the same property though?
Same property.
Oh,
same with the Indian guy. So I didn't even wait for the Indian guy's story. So I just moved on, and I spoke to my lawyers and I said, you know what? It's official, I've been had. And so he said, okay, we need to write to this police, and then we wrote the petition. EFCC said, they have a cut-off point of cases that they could, deal with or whatever. I don't know, but maybe for some reason they didn't want to touch it. I don't know. I can't speak for that. But we went through the police, and it was, oh, you have to bring money for this way. Oh, we're almost getting them. One of them, the number was traced to, I think, Ondo or something or whatever, But I left it with a lawyer because at that point, I even told the lawyer, I said, you know what, whatever the police says, and it's positive, then I'm interested. If they haven't found them, I don't think I can handle it because my heart was in pieces. I was struggling because I was like, I prayed about this, and it's not like maybe I prayed for a week or 2 weeks.
You've been trusting for it.
I've been trusting for it. And the reason, more so the reason, because I didn't say, God, this is my specific. It was a response that I saw. And it's very easy to say that. It's one thing to see something. It's another thing to actually believe that you saw it. Because I remember speaking to a friend and she said, oh, are you sure it's not your heart desire that popped up and then you felt like it was God that showed you? And I said, you know what? I don't even want to deal with that. Because at that point in time, I don't think it's a negative that I really wanted to deal with. How did I recover? Initially, it wasn't about recovery. I can tell you that. It had nothing to do with recovery. Because I felt like I've prayed about this. There was provision. Even though it took everything that I had, God couldn't have provided that money. That was what I felt initially. That why did God make provision for that money when He knew
someone to take it away?
That somebody was going to take it away. I went through that emotion, and I thought to myself, wait a minute, God doesn't do that. That's not how God operates. So it was during one of my questioning what happened, not so much blaming God for what happened. I blamed myself because I was like, God, was there a time that you told me something that I missed it, and this is my punishment for it. So I thought to myself, you know what, I'm sinking. And for the first time, people talk about being paralyzed, and I just look at them and I'm saying that, what do you know about being paralyzed? But for the first time, I experienced it. And for the first time, I realized when people say that, somebody's walking dead, I knew exactly what, things were happening around me, but I didn't know what was happening around me. I was just too I was more or less like a zombie. But in my head, and the only thing that I could, that could keep me going was to have conversations with God. And at that point in time, I said to the Lord, Lord, I don't want to fall out of favor with you. Because I know that I'm slipping. If you can just hold me, that I don't fall out of favor with you. And I shared it with, my friend, and I said, I just don't want to fall out of favor with God. And then, she said to me, she goes, God understands. She would check on me. She would say, I just want to check on you, because, this can make people go into depression or whatever. Though I remember one morning when she came and she said, oh, you look like you've sunk into depression. And I said, no, I haven't sunk into depression. And I said, I can't afford to be depressed because I can't afford to fall out of favor with God. And I don't want to ask God why this happened. Because the Lord sees. And if the Lord sees, surely He will take care of it.
Can I just interject a bit? So, I mean, people, I know time has passed, not many years, but time has passed. You're being casual about it, so people are probably thinking, it's one house in, due respect to those, it's one house on the other side of the border somewhere. I know you don't want to talk figures, I know you're not the kind of person, but do you want to talk about the location, just so our viewers have a fair idea of what kind of resources must have gone into it? I know you also said you put in almost everything you had. A lot of, resources went into it, but just, a hint about the location. So.
Okay, I'll give you a hint. It was definitely Ikoyi.
So.
And it was in one of the estates in Ikoyi. I think I'll just go as far as that.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So again, another question I want to ask is, did the devil at any point make you feel like, because you say you were praying and you were saying you don't want to fall out of favor. Didn't you feel like you fell out of favor already by losing those funds to fraudsters in the first place?
Well, if you remember in my conversation earlier, I said I felt like, did God prompt me and I ignored it? Okay. That was, at that time, I don't think, for me already, I felt like, why is this happening to me? But then at the same time, I was afraid to dwell on why is this happening to me? Because I was more concerned about not falling out of favor with God. So I felt like perhaps God has, spoken to me and I missed it. And then there was a time that my friend said, are you sure that when you prayed, that God actually showed you that this is the house He has prepared for you? And by the way, I'm not saying that the particular house, I always say that what I saw was a room short. What I chose was a room more. So it could have easily been seen as an icing on the cake, but it's nothing comparison to, it fits the bill somehow, but it's not quite what I saw. But I just saw that, sometimes, you think you saw this, but this is really what God has given you. There have people who have given testimonies that I thought God was going to give me this, but instead He gave me this. Dwelling on that, I think for me, with the part, where I think the devil wanted to mess around with me was, you didn't listen. And because you didn't listen, this is the consequences for not listening.
I mean, in those times, I feel like, not to put words in your mouth, you want to blame. So the devil likes to have a field day in situations like that. You want to blame God, you want to blame yourself. It's just, an observation that when you're in that place, the devil wants to make you go mad. Like, wants to make you go crazy. Just keeps bringing thoughts and thoughts and thoughts and thoughts. Was that what you experienced, Titi?
I already felt like I was gone, because that's what I meant by when people talk about being paralyzed. I felt I was gone. I was more like a zombie. And the thing is, that when you're paralyzed, your brain stops somehow. you know, and that's how I felt. I felt like my brain had just like stopped, you know, and the negative thoughts that were coming, you know, through my head was like, there you go, you know, you didn't listen, so here you go. Then also I felt like, oh, every time I want to do something, then something happens. Why can't something good come out for at least this time? You know, and then there was the thought of, God, you know, if I'm being punished for something, you know, is there a time that, you know, you're lenient, you know, with me? Then I thought, because I lead a Bible study, I also questioned God. I was like, so after leading you know, the Bible study,
after all I've done for you,
I've done and everything, you want me to go back to the ladies in Bible study and tell them that you failed? You know, then I almost took it back. You know, I was like, God didn't fail. You know, there's something that I did, you know, and I needed to make it right. But at the same time, I was too paralyzed to do anything. I couldn't even pray. And I think the conversations at that time, so that's why I always say to people, when you talk about prayers, it's not about this routine thing or whatever. But for me, I couldn't pray, but I knew that if I spoke to him, you know, he understands. And because I feel that he knows me, he knows who I am, he knows what I'm thinking. So if we have this conversation, it'll be easier. And I needed him to listen. So the best way for me to get him to listen was to just beg God and say, God, please don't let me fall out of favor with you. Because I knew that the consequences to fall out of favor was more than what I was going through.
What you had lost.
Yeah.
You felt like something could be worse than what you lost?
I felt like I've gone through a lot. You know, I see myself as, you know, a patchwork fabric. That you have fragments in some parts the textile is fraying, and some parts it looks solid. You know, and I've seen God pull me through a lot of things. When this hit me, I thought that was it. You know, and I thought to God, I said, God, so I'm going to be homeless. You know, people know that I serve you. So how do I go back and say, oh, by the way, I prayed to the Lord and the Lord, this is what happened. You know, it doesn't, you know, it doesn't make any sense. So instead of asking the why, I just kept saying, Lord, I don't want to ask questions, because for the fear of, if I ask questions, it might be the wrong one, and I might provoke his anger. So the easiest thing for me to do was just to hold on to what I know best, you know. And then I think I got that from my dad, because, you know, when my dad was alive, I'll see him go through like excruciating situations, and then all he does is pray and fast. You know, and I'm like, okay, if it worked for him, it's going to work for me, you know. And also because, like I said, when I look back, God has been there for me. Even when I thought I couldn't go further, or when I thought that this is it, this is the end of the road, God has always showed up. So in this particular instance, you know, I was just waiting for God to show up, because I didn't know what else to do. You know, I couldn't think past, you know, that moment. If you had asked me in an hour's time, I couldn't respond to you. You know, my friend who was there, somebody that came to visit me, I didn't have words. I did not have words, but I became very numb. And I didn't want to keep repeating my story. So each time I had to deal with the police, it was like repeating that story again.
And then the pain comes back again. And the pain
comes back again, yeah. So it was, you know, I would say I was numb, you know.
So one thing I take from that is that like scripture comes to mind that says that you are judged God faithful. Like, I think it's the story of Abraham, if I'm not mistaken. He judged God to be faithful. So in whatever you were going through, you didn't put it back on God. You still feel like you judged God to be faithful. You thought maybe I'm the challenge, maybe I didn't see it, maybe I didn't think through, but whatever it is, you weren't ready to trade blames. You were just like, God is faithful. God is the person we go back to take us out of the mess, right?
Yes.
Like that.
Yes.
So let's talk about recovery. Did you get a new house? How do you define recovery? How do you recover from something like that?
To be honest with you, I think, I would say that, when you say submit and then let God just pretty much, do his work, I wouldn't say I was submissive, but I would say that I was like a robot, because after, I think I didn't do anything for a couple of days. I can't say for exact time, this is the exact time, no, I can't say that. But what I would say is the manager of the building that we're in said, by the end of January, we had to be out. So I said to him, I opened up to him and I said, look, something has happened. And I told him what happened. And he says, oh my God, this thing is really rampant around this area, that it happened to somebody else. So he said to me, he says, well, let's look at a couple of apartments, and see. And I said to him, I said, you don't understand. I don't have any money, So he said to me, he says, but I know you. And I thought to myself, I don't know what you know, but I don't have any money, And then he said, okay, I know you don't have any money, but just come. Let's go and have a look at a couple of places. And then he says that there's another guy, who was also in the compound, that was also, it was also scammed.
Oh.
So I thought to myself, I said, you know what? I don't feel like going anywhere, and he said to me, he said, look, the best way to overcome this, is to walk the same path again. So when he said it, in my mind, I'm just like, please, you're trying to do your job, leave me and let me deal with, what I need to deal with. But for some reason, I got in the car and I said, okay, let's go see. I wasn't really interested, to be honest with you, because I was like, God has dealt with me. I don't have any money, so, what am I looking at? So the first place that he took me, I burst into tears. As soon as we walked into the space, I just burst into tears because, I looked at the state of the place, and then I looked at the size around me, and then I was like, why am I here? And he looked at me and he says, you're crying, madam, you're crying. And I said, no. I said, I'll get over it. So I said to him, I said, just give me a few minutes. I need to breathe. So he was, at that point, he was worried. He was like, I hope nothing will happen to this woman in this place. And I said, no. So I went by the window, took a deep breath, and I turned around and I said to him, I said, this is not the place. I said, if I come here, I'll die. And then he was like, madam, you will not die. I said, oh, you don't understand, I would die. So we left that, and when we got downstairs, I said to him, I said, I don't think I have the energy, or I don't think I'm ready to,
to go
this journey. But for some reason, he encouraged me. He said, let's see another property, and then we drove to that property, and when we got downstairs, I was so silly, now that I think about it, it was just like, Titi, come on, really. It had everything, it was fully furnished. So he said to me, it's fully furnished. So I looked at him and I said, who told you I want a furnished apartment? I already have my stuff. So why do I want a furnished apartment? So we got to the kitchen. And when we got to the kitchen, we were looking at the stovetop, and I don't know why my mind went to the stovetop, to be quite honest with you, and I looked on the dial. I know now it might seem like, it's silly, but I also believe that God speaks to me in pictures. So I looked at the dial, what the gas is. And it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I looked at the dial and I said, God, you took me from 0 all the way to 4. And I can't stand the heat. The heat is too much for me. I can't stand the heat. And he saw my focus on the stove and he said, oh, but they can change it or you can use yours. And I looked at him and I said, it's not about the stove. I said, it's the fire. And I said, the fire is too hot. And then he said to me, he says, look, you're a strong woman. Let's go. We'll find another place. So I said to him, I said, not today. And as we were coming down the stairs, the other guy that was in the compound that was scammed, he was coming in and he said, oh, that's the guy I was telling you about. And so, I went across and I spoke to the guy and I said, oh, I heard this happen to you. And what about, he said, madam, that, I'm going to get those scammers and all that stuff. And I looked at him and I said, you know what? I said, you probably will find them. You probably will not find them. But the most important thing is at least you have a roof over your head. I don't even know where my own roof over my own head is going to be. And then he said, no, madam. I said, under normal circumstances, this is not what I want for myself. But, well, keep looking. You might find something. And I said, thank you. And I gave up. Basically, I was just looking forward to going home to my apartment and wallow in my sorrow. And of course, as soon as I got home, the manager calls me again and said, I have one place for you. And I said, no, I don't want to look at anything. I said, for now, I just want to be quiet. And I said, until the Lord leads me to where I need to go. Then he said, unfortunately, I need to tell you that you're running out of time. I had a week left to move out of the place I was in. And I didn't know where I was going. And I still did not have funds. But anyway, the next day, I don't know what prompted me. But I just said to him, I said, okay, let's go and look. Worst case scenario, I don't like it, but let's go and look. But really, when I said, let's go and look, it was an avenue, something for me to get out of the house. I knew that I needed to get out of the house. I couldn't stay in the house. And so we got into, I went in his car, and I told my driver to drive, behind us. And then he said this building, and at the beginning I was saying, I can't afford this place. I can't afford this place. So he said to me, he says, let's see it. And we walked into the apartment downstairs. I looked around it. I looked around and I said, oh, it's okay. But I said, you know what? It's not what I wanted. And the other thing is, I wanted a 2-bedroom. But the 2-bedroom I came for was gone. It was a security guard that said to me, oh, there's a 3-bedroom. And I said, I don't want a 3-bedroom. Because in my mind, I'm just like, everything has been taken away. So, even if it's a box, it's okay. That's where God wants me to be. So be it. So we looked. And then when we looked at the 2 empty spots downstairs, I was like, you know what? I've had enough fresh air for today. It's time for us to go. So the security says, no, madam, let's go upstairs. And I said, no. It's so funny. It was a security guard that got me upstairs. So when I came upstairs, there was a bright light. When the sunlight hits each other, but it caught my attention. And I looked around and I said, Lord, I feel at peace here. Then the devil on the other side was saying, but you can't afford it. You don't have anything to give. Then I said to them, we came back to where the living room was. And I said to them, I just want to walk around this house one more time. And I walked around the house and then I said, Lord, if it is your will, then I know this is what you've provided for me. And I heard a voice saying that it's a place of healing. And I thought to myself, okay, the Lord wants to heal me. Then as soon as we got into the car, I was like, you're so stupid. You don't have any money. You're thinking of, how are you going to pay for?
How are you going to live in the place?
How are you going to live with this? Get a grip. But one thing I realized was that I started behaving more human. When I say I started behaving more human, was I was now having a conversation. My neighbor had gotten a house. She had bought her house. She was supposed to move, but because of me, she stayed behind. So I said to her, oh, I found a place, but obviously I don't have any money. So the first thing my neighbor said is that, well, Shebi, it's you, It's now that you pray and then God will just give it to you. And I said to her, I said, I don't know what the deal is with myself and God at the moment, but I'm willing, So, I, for the first time since the whole incident happened, I just said to God, God, I'm trusting you. I'm trusting you. If this is truly the place of healing, then I know you will do it. And trust me, before the end of the day, part of the funds came in. I was dumbfounded. I was just like, and this was something that was supposed to have happened like what? Maybe a month or so. And then I was like, really? Then at the shop, somebody came through. I was like, what's going on? And in less than 24 hours,
provision came.
The funds came. I had to borrow the last 2 million to complete it. And that was just to pay. The whole rent came through. But I think it was to pay the agency fee and whatever. And I was like, oh, I can't do this. And I was like, you know what? If it's because of the 2 million, look, listen, I can't do it. But the Lord decided to surprise me. I went ahead because I panicked. I went ahead of the Lord and I said, okay, you know what? Let me see if I can borrow the 2 million, then that would be fine. And I did. And it was almost like God was telling me that I don't want you to borrow. I just want you to trust me because I'll make provision for it. Because the Lord did provide for it. And that's how I moved in. But recovery started when I moved out. It wasn't before I moved in. Because all that while previously, I was like a robot, really. It was not until I actually moved in that my recovery started.
Yeah, so before we started this interview, we were talking and I was like, there are people who have lost less. People who've committed suicide, young people who are listening to us, who are on the verge of taking their lives because they feel things are not working, they've lost something, they've lost someone, but I'm excited. I mean, from the moment I spoke to you, it encouraged me that you're still standing. I've lost a few things in my life. I know how it feels. I know how you replayed over and over again. So I just want you to give a word of encouragement to someone who's lost something. Titi, you're standing. And I dare say you're casual. You're too casual for someone that lost something that huge. But what do you have to say to someone who lost something and is on the verge of giving up, saying God is not faithful, thinking, blaming themselves in the rut? What do you have to say?
It might sound like a cliche, but what I've learned or what this whole experience has taught me is that when you lose something, it's actually God's way of making room for something. Because if I didn't lose what I had lost, I would not be where I am. Not only with my relationship with God, but the way I see things. Which, it's funny. The loss brought peace. And people will say, how can a loss bring peace? It depends on which way you want to have a look at it. But I would say to anybody that maybe they've lost someone, because there has been instances where I've lost someone, or they've lost property or lost something valuable. I think one of the things I mentioned to you was that somebody came to visit me, and he said, oh, what you lost is child's play to what I have lost in my business.
And they're still standing.
And it's still standing. And then I thought to myself that if he has lost so much, then, what is mine in comparison? But The time of loss is not when you want to give up. Because the victory is rising above the loss, you know, and if you look at people who are way out there, who have depth, you find out that they failed so many times, but they still get up, you know. And the truth of the matter is, you cheat yourself out of the goodness to come when you decide that this is the end of the road. Because the joy is getting up. It's not staying down and saying goodbye. I've done it, done and dusted. But it's to say that, look, this happened to me. You know, God pulled me out of it. You know.
It's hard to add. It's very hard to add anything to what you've said. So I'll just echo your words and say to anyone who is suffering a loss out there, who is trying to recover, you know, that the victory is when you stand up. You know, you're bigger than whatever you've lost. You're bigger than what you're going through. God has greater plans for you if you don't give up. So get out of it and God will help you and strengthen you. We were talking and I said I had 2 prayer points that I was praying repeatedly. So I pray for you, just like Jesus prayed for Peter, just like he said to Peter, the devil has decided to sift you like wheat. But I pray for you that your faith will fail not. You know, another scripture says that your strength will fail not. And that's my prayer for you watching us today. Whatever you're going through, it's interesting times. I mean, we're in interesting times in Nigeria at the moment. So whatever you are losing, whatever you have lost, I pray for you that your strength will not fail and that your faith will not fail. And when you come out of it, please, like Titi is doing today, strengthen your brothers. God bless you. Thank you for watching Moving Miracles. Titi, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. And might I add that when you lose something, it's an open door to something else, to newness. You know, and we should always be ready to receive the newness that God has in store for us.
Amen.
But thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for coming. Thank you we had a lovely time.
Thank you.